Another Breaking the Ice during Amsterdam FinTech Week. My name is Don Ginsel and I'll be your host for today and talk you through latest developments in FinTech together with my co-host, Jeroen Broekema. Very much welcome, Jeroen.
Thank you, Don. Great to be here.
It's really nice to have you here on the show. I mean, we've talked quite a lot recently, but so I know there's a lot to talk about, and I'm really looking forward to look ahead at today and the rest of Amsterdam FinTech Week together with you, especially also since you're doing a wonderful panel today at 1 p.m. So really happy for everyone who's listening in. What we'll do today is actually explore a little bit what Jeroen's background is. I think he's done quite some wonderful things in finance and outside of that I think are worth knowing for all of you. And of course, we'll look ahead at his panel that he will be doing this afternoon on innovation and policy. Always a tough combination where there's always a challenge to solve, I would say. And for the rest, we'll also look ahead at the rest of the program of Amsterdam FinTech Week today. So I'm very much looking forward to having you here in this talk, Jeroen. And actually, not so long ago, it was actually we were in reverse roles, and you were interviewing me for your Leaders in Finance podcast, right? I saw we just talked about the wonderful news that you got a nomination for Best Business Podcast also in this morning. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great start of the day to see that this BNR prize you can win, and being nominated for the Best Business Podcast Award is a great thing, and I'm very happy to see that. So and I must say I'm actually I need to get used to the idea that you are going to ask me questions, because having interviewed you only a month ago or something was probably a bit more comfortable, but yeah, great to talk to you.
No, definitely. So I think maybe just to talk a little bit about the Leaders in Finance podcast, because I think it's really fascinating what you've set up there, and I think you must get great insights actually in talking to all these different people with different backgrounds in the financial industry. So tell us a little bit more about it. What's your intention with it?
Yeah, so when I left the financial services industry to take a sabbatical in the fall of 2019, I thought, like, what is it that I would really love to do, which I would normally never do? And I went through this list of things that I had, written down over the last few years.
Sort of, yeah.
What's that? Sorry.
Sort of your bucket list.
Well, I mean, not necessarily. More things that I know I never going to do in my life, but maybe one or two or three of them. And this one was one that I thought, I would never do normally when I'm in a busy job and family back home. But I thought this is the one that excites me the most. And so I thought, why not just do it? People will maybe find it weird to be going from a managing director position in FinTech towards running a podcast, but I thought, I like it. I love to do it. So let's give it a try. So I did some training because I didn't know anything about how to do this. I'm still learning, by the way, as we go. I worked together with a podcast company, Microphone Media, and they helped me to set it all up, and just started to invite the first guests. And what I'm really trying to do, what's behind all of this is really, I want people to talk more about their businesses, but also, and probably even more so, about themselves. Like, what really drives them? Why are they in the financial services? Why are they in FinTech? Why are they in a bank? Yeah. So I really want to do that. So what I'm trying to do with the guests as well as CEOs from more traditional financial services companies or governments, all the way to small startup FinTechs and everything in between. That's what I'm really trying to do. But I do stay in this grand niche of the financial services. So it could be pension fund to a young startup FinTech to, the Ministry of Finance, but it has to be linked to the financial services. That's the grand niche in which I'm operating.
Yeah, well, that's indeed a familiar area. I think I also look at that as a very interesting one because it almost touches on everything. But at the same time, it's also kind of bound by similarities all along. And so is there anything particular that you learned that you wouldn't think you would learn, for example, about certain habits that people have or certain ways of doing things?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the more people I interview, and every week I do one, and I'm doing it since February. So I've done somewhere 35 and I already recorded 5 or 6 more. So let's say I have about a 40. It's not that much yet because I hope to do hundreds. But based on that 40, and to your question, I really think there's a couple of things that come back all the time. I'm not saying they come back in every 40, but in like 80% at least. And number one, I think, is that these people are all successful, right? I mean, it depends on how you define success, but in a way, they're successful in what they do. And there's not much rational planning behind it. It's not. I haven't met anyone that said, I wanted to become CEO. These are the steps I've taken, and I got to that position. Or, I wanted to be founding this company. Now, really, it is a lot of things that just came on their way. But one thing that is very clear, all of them have worked really hard and are still working really hard. So there's a lot of luck involved and a lot of, it just happens. But combined with a lot of hard work, that really is one big theme. And the other big theme I see is that they are much more willing to be vulnerable in these conversations about the things they're not good at, the things they have been struggling with, as well as the challenges they see ahead. And I'm really surprised about that, because I thought they would be, careful and, be very diplomatic about everything and all these, standard PR lines. But not at all. All of them, whether they were CEOs of big traditional companies or banks or fintechs and everything between, members of parliament, professors, they're all super open and vulnerable. And that will be the second theme. And the third one, it really is that they all talk about, wanting to do more for society, for clients, for their employees, as well as for the shareholders. So much more the stakeholder model. However, there's one big however here. They all talk about it, but I see the struggles in how are they going to do it. Some of them have gone a bit further, but even the ones that are leading the pack are still struggling with how to do that. And especially the ones that have, obviously are listed companies. They have a harder time to do this sometimes. But they're all trying to do more. So these are the 3 major themes, I would say, so far.
Yeah. Well, I think that's already good. These are quite important lessons, not just for you, but I think also for your listeners. I think quite useful. And actually, to the latter point, I think I sort of understand it as well, because I think if you actually want to be successful, you have to also fit very well in basically in your time, right? So you actually have to fit well in what's needed at that moment and how you adjust yourself to the way society works at that moment. And so you might have the ambition to do differently, but you still have to fit in, right? And I think that's always the struggle, I think, for people. You can't take a too giant leap because you'll lose the herd. And that means you won't be successful anymore. And so you won't be able to make a change. So that's I think, definitely always a challenge. Oh, it's very interesting. I think it must be lots of fun to talk to all these people in different environments as well, because you visit them at home from time to time as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I meet people actually at 3 places, and now with Corona, the third one is added. The third one is the garden of people's houses, because people prefer to be outside. Same for me. I prefer to be outside in these times. But also, I do record at the companies or organizations they work for. As well as in the Dutch Vondelpark studio. It's this beautiful building in the Vondelpark in Amsterdam. So these are the 3 locations I record. But yeah, you people that listen to my podcast frequently, they will figure out that sometimes they hear birds in the background, but that's part of the deal.
Yeah, exactly. I think it only adds to the story, I would say. But cool. So, and how does it trigger you, perhaps for your next step? I mean, that's what maybe also people would be curious about. I mean, you've had some really nice roles in the financial industry, like with Funding Circle. Do you already is something cooking already within you? Maybe also inspired by all these conversations that you're having on what could be your next step.
Well, it's, to be honest, I have no idea. So I took this sabbatical a year ago. At the moment, it doesn't feel as a sabbatical anymore. I'm actually quite busy with a lot of different things. I also do some advice to fintechs and do some freelance work here and there. But I'm very open, and I really like this time in my life where I can just see what will cross my path. Yes, I love to run a company again, like I did in the past with Funding Circle. But there's a lot of interesting things out there. Equally, the things I'm doing right now are really good. So I'm just very open to things. And also, when I took a sabbatical, I said this could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 years. So, and I still try to live by that idea. And I must say that having some flexibility is great, but also that comes with a price, because sometimes you want to have full end responsibility for something again. Obviously, I do that for the podcast, but that's different than running a multi-million business. So really, it's we will see. I try to be open-minded to see what will happen. I know I'm not answering your question because really, this is the answer. So.
No, but that's all right. I think it's. I can imagine that also. You do get a lot of ideas on what you could do by speaking to all these different people with different roles, different responsibilities, different ways of doing things, which can be nice indeed. But it might indeed also.
I can tell you one thing, which is which crossed my path. I see that anti-money laundering is a massive issue everywhere, and it's the papers are full of articles on it. And so we created, with a group of companies, created a kind of a podcast for which we call a podcast insight on AML, which would be a paid service, because there's it's a lot of production work to create really a great podcast. So these are things I do on the side, and they may become really big. So we'll see. But again, these are things I do for now, and we'll see what the future will hold.
Yeah, no, really nice. I think it's. I think you've got it's just also really nice that you could actually take your have the liberty to take your time and figure out what comes on your path, and when you're ready for it to then take the next step. Yeah, so really cool. And so I think what I'm a bit curious about as well is let's say if you look at you've lived abroad as well, right? And so when you came into the Dutch fintech market, I'm sort of curious what your experience was there. So what did you sort of discover? Did you feel that there was something really bubbling up and really interesting, or did you see that it was also some way lagging behind? Or what was your first hunch when you actually landed here and started working in that area?
Well, I must say that you know much more about the broader fintech world than I do. So I've mainly been active in the lending space, so in the platform lending space, and obviously I've met a lot of other fintech entrepreneurs. But I'm always quite positive about the Netherlands in terms of what's happening, given its scale, because you need to put it in that scale perspective. If you compare to the UK or the US or China, you could, but still, it's 16 million people, 17 million people. Even the UK is like 4 or 5 times bigger. So really, well, that's a bit exaggerated, but not 5, definitely not 3 to 4 times. But really, if you put it in that perspective, that is, then it's still great what is happening here in the lending space. What I see though is that there's in the fintech lending space, there's not that many players, and I think that also counts for a lot of other fintech areas where they really make that skill to even to become a global or at least a European player. And I mean, a lot of people know a lot more about this than I do, but it obviously has to do with, like kind of cultural thinking. Is definitely, like it's already great if you go abroad. There's other players that they don't think about going abroad. What I've seen a lot, because I've worked a lot in San Francisco and in London for Funding Circle, it's always the mindset from we start in, let's say, San Francisco, and then it's global, or London, and then it's global. And here, what I often see is it's Netherlands, and maybe we can add Germany, or we can add the UK, or maybe we even go all the way to the US. But it's that step in between, which, I'm not saying that's wrong or anything. I'm just saying that doesn't always lead to immediately the global thinking. And again, I'm not judging that that's good or bad. I'm just what I'm observing.
So curious to explore something here, because that's at least it triggers me. Could it be the case that actually, for example, if you're based in America, you actually have that idea that, let's say, you have America and global is basically sort of the next jurisdiction, while maybe in Europe we're actually really raised and experiencing on a day-to-day basis that actually the second country is the next jurisdiction, and behind that is another jurisdiction, and behind that another one. So that we're just used to actually seeing the world maybe in a much more complex way, and therefore we actually take it much more one bite at a time rather than seeing it as one big chunk.
No,
Could that be the case?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And again, I also come back to my previous point, my earlier point, which is we see amazingly successful companies here, like Arjun, like Mali, like a lot of tech companies, like Mendix, like, you know, there's a lot of companies that actually go global. And given our size, you know, I recently interviewed the former president of the Dutch Central Bank, Nout Welling, and he also said, I mean, it's kind of a joke in a way how small the Netherlands is. I mean, there's 17 million people. He said, my bank it's the biggest bank in the world, but has 650 million clients and 500,000 people working there. I mean, that is a different way of thinking, right? And what I really liked about what he said, when you deal with that number of customers, in general, if you deal with that number of anything in your bank, you have to use technology. There's no other way around it. You can never fix it with people. Whereas here, you can still fix a lot of things with people. And I really like that, how he said that, because I think it makes total sense that the bigger the numbers are, the more tech you have to use. And the more tech you use, the better you can scale. And the better you can see the globe as your market instead of one jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think, and that's one of the challenges, right? So I think that's where you see a big difference also with tech industries that are not financial, that just have to deal with a different regulatory regime, and usually find it easier to scale than heavily regulated industries like the financial one. And so I think it's interesting because that's also a nice bridge towards your panel this afternoon. Right. So do you think that it's also basically the drive for growth and whether policy should facilitate that? Is that also something you want to discuss this afternoon in your panel?
Yes, I mean, we had this pretty broad topic of innovation and policy, as you mentioned earlier, but we have to choose a couple of subtopics to make sure we kind of focus, because there's many things there. But yes, we definitely want to touch upon that. And do you want me to take me through the main topics we want to discuss, or? Yeah,
I'm really curious what we can expect. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so we actually said we focus on three things. So one is the whole story around the Payment Services Directive, so PSD2. Yep. And what's really interesting about the people that are on the panel is that it's from all angles. So there's an entrepreneur on there, Biscuit, Hessel Kai. Yep. There is someone from the Dutch Central Bank, Tijmen Daniels. There's a European lawyer from Bird & Bird, Annette Prince-Nielsen. And then there is the Chief Innovation Officer from a more traditional bank, ABN AMRO. Yep. So they all have shed their light on PSD2 and where we stand. We also will discuss the following teaser, which is the introduction of PSD2 has overall been a success in Europe. So that's what we discuss. We go through that. That's one. Second,
do you expect some to disagree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends. I mean, but I think so. Yeah, I think people will say that things are not going fast enough, and that maybe there will be some discussion with the bank representative there to what extent they're actually opening up everything they should. But these are just hunches. I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Looking forward to that. I think it's definitely an interesting angle.
Yeah, I think so too. And I know the story from Biscuit. I think it's a very interesting story how they have applied it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hear, but also to hear from, for example, from Annette, the lawyer, to where they're dealing with their customers in terms of the regulation there. The second topic is really about crypto asset regulation and the technology behind it. Also a very broad subtopic again, but that's going to be very interesting. And I do want to try to also touch upon something I'm very interested in personally, which is the what they call the CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency that the Dutch Central Bank is talking about. I hope we also get to learn there a little bit. And then the third one is around big tech and how I want to start to ask the regulator they have been monitoring big tech for a long time, but where do they stand right now? How they want to deal with it, and they should be doing more or less to enable them or to work together with the traditional or fintech space. So these are the three major topics within that even broader topic. So hopefully to structure that only in 1 hour.
Yeah, that's going to be quite a challenge because, of course, there's so much to talk about. But I think it's really, it sounds like it's really, it's going to be really interesting. And I think especially if you talk about CDBC, central bank digital currency, or basically also how to deal with big techs, you see that these topics are really challenging the current mandate of the regulators. And therefore, it's really about how, we will sort of reinvent how policy should actually govern the industry. Because we won't be able to follow the existing lines to just keep things safe again. And I think that's really a relevant topic these days, because it is we're being challenged on all ends on where the boundaries of the industry actually are, and how to safeguard the playing field as a whole. So really curious how that'll work out. And I think it's really nice to also indeed have these different players from the central bank to large incumbent players, as well as innovators and lawyers. So there should be a really nice discussion. Yeah, for sure.
I hope so. Yeah.
Hopefully, I've got a meeting again next week about the fintech action plan of the Dutch government. So I'll be listening in carefully and see if I can pick up some things to bring to the table there.
Great.
Sounds very good. So what I'll do is also I'll just check in on the rest of the program of the day, which I'm also curious about. At least want to show you what we're up to. So it's really nice. I think the agenda is quite full for today. And although innovation and policy has been a sort of an overarching theme that we use in the Breaking the Ice session now, as well as in the panel session that Jeroen is moderating around lunchtime, we've got some really cool events from Hubbard, talking about banking as a platform. Also, definitely something that popped up very much due to the implementation of PSD2, as you were just describing. Interworks is doing an event on the digital accountant, which I think is also a really appealing topic. I think one of the hypes these days is talking about a digital twin, so basically creating a completely fully digital mirror of your whole organization, so you could actually manage and steer everything that's going on there. Then we have Tink, who's going to talk about, again, open banking. So again, PSD2 related. So I think that's really interesting as well, because they got quite some good insights into all the various banks and how they respond to open banking. Then we have your panel at 1. And then we have a session of the European Women's in Payments Network. They did some very interesting research about trafficking, for example, and how the financial industry could actually help evade that, which I think is really a good point. So I'm really looking forward to that session as well. And then the end of the day, there's an event by Stater. That's a large mortgage provider, also part of the ABN AMRO group. And they'll be launching a new innovation campaign as well, where I'll be joining in person. So it's quite a nice full agenda. Banking, open banking are really in focus today. And of course, there's always this policy angle, like we were discussing with PSD2. For example, on how banks are being forced to open up and share their data. Is there anything that you're looking into as well, Jeroen, that would have your interest?
Well, I'm specifically interested in the whole PSD2 and open banking world. That's something I can relate to very well from my previous job. So it's not to say that I do think the other topics are very interesting as well, but this is something I know a little bit about, so I feel more comfortable to learn even more. But I'm also very curious how that's going to play out in the future. I find it very hard to make up my mind on how this is gonna play out. I'm really curious, and it feels sometimes that it's developing slowly, but if you look back in time, it's actually going quite fast. So I'm really curious how this is going to play out.
Yeah, that's almost philosophically. I think it always looks like things are coming at us very slowly, but in hindsight, they're gone before you know it, right? So, but I think it's interesting, and I'm also I truly believe that we're going towards a much more open standard for data in general, and probably we'll have some steps in between. So you see now that in Europe we're starting to talk about not just open payments, which PSD2 regulates, but actually open finance. So you go to a broader financial perspective. But only then actually after that you go to open data, where you actually could expect any digital service provider or any service provider actually to be to give you access to your own data with or without a service provider in between. So you could actually talk to your telco or your energy provider or the government itself that actually could give you access to the data to use it in all kinds of services that you would like. And I think from that perspective, it's very interesting what's happening in the financial industry at the moment. But I'm also quite sure that we're not there yet. There's definitely still things to amend. So a PSD3 wouldn't really surprise me there. Although I do hope we can actually make the jump to the next level on open finance or open data in general. Yeah. So are you a bit of a techie, Jeroen? Do you like to play around with the data and those kind of things, or is it not really your thing?
I mean, I find it super interesting, but the honest answer is I don't have any tech background. I have really a financial services background as well as a management background. But I'm always very interested, and we had a team in a big tech team in London as well as in Sofia, Bulgaria. So I've been a lot in London and Sofia to join the tech teams, but always more from a product sales angle to give that input than really coding myself or understanding that.
No, exactly. But maybe then one question that pops up to me, which I think is interesting, is a lot of people that don't have a technical background have a hard time sort of feeling comfortable with what the technology is doing. So what it actually is, and do you actually have a grip on it, and what does it then do, and how secure is it, for example? How did you cope with that? Because that can be challenging from time to time.
It is a very, very good question, because I think this is the multi-dollar question for every manager that has not a tech background. I've spoken a lot with my guests about this as well as with other people high up in the hierarchy of a lot of financial services business, but also outside financial services. But really, ultimately, it comes down to, do you have leadership in those tech parts of your business that you really trust, but that are also able to explain what they're doing in simple wording, so that people without a coding or tech background can actually follow that. And I think that is extremely important. That I always try to have product managers and tech leads around me that I really thought were able to explain what they were doing. And that doesn't matter that there's people in their teams that are purely busy with the coding and the tech, but as long as there's people on top that have that link, that's why product manager is still very important, because you need to have that link to the outside world and the end customer. So yeah, it's a very broad answer, but yes, I felt very often very uncomfortable with things that were happening. One example, if I think it's time, but if a 0 turns into a 1 in a huge database, that is can have a massive impact. I've seen that myself. And you, as a manager, you freak out, because that has extreme severe impact on your business. Yep. Same with cybersecurity. It's easy to become very scared about what can happen, but equally you need to trust. So ultimately, you need to trust people. It's the people that run those tech things. But I think we're running out of time. So
no, I just wanted to let you finish your point, because I think it's really interesting, and a lot of people struggle with this. So. But it's two things, right? So it's basically being able to really understand the tech itself. But one layer you can definitely cut away, and I think that's what you were describing with the good project manager, is actually cutting out the jargon, right? That's also why financial services in general is relatively hard to understand, is because we use jargon for things that we could also explain differently. And if you actually peel it down to regular language, it's not so complex after all, right? But yeah, let's say I think in general, good advice there. Thanks, Jeroen. Because indeed we have to wrap up. So Thank you very much, Jeroen, for sharing your insights and being available here for this start of the day. I'm really looking forward to your panel at 1 p.m. Hope you enjoy.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Hope to see you there.
Definitely, we'll be there. And thank you all for listening in. I hope you will enjoy today's program and, of course, the rest of the week. See you all later.